Imagine, just for a second, a massive, sprawling medieval castle. You've got towering stone walls, a really deep moat, maybe some heavily guarded drawbridges. Now, building a fortress like that takes precision. It takes deep architectural knowledge. But here's the thing. Knowing how to build it is really only half the battle. If you want that castle to actually survive, you also have to know exactly how an invading army would lay siege to it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking that exact castle and siege metaphor and we're applying it to the digital fortresses of our modern world. We are going to break down exactly how computer networks are built from the ground up, and then we're going to totally flip the script and look at exactly how they are besieged by hackers. And I should mention, absolutely all of our insights for today's explainer come directly from one incredibly comprehensive source, Hacking AI by Hans Weber. I mean, just look at that cool cyberpunk aesthetic on the cover. It so perfectly captures the dual nature of what we're talking about today, you know? You have the highly structured, predictable logic of machines, and it's clashing right up against the unpredictable and, yes, sometimes malicious intent of humans. Weber's guide is honestly an absolute masterclass. He takes these super complex IT and cybersecurity concepts and makes them totally accessible. So we're pulling all of our facts, our definitions, and our threat models straight from his work. Okay, here is the blueprint for today. We're starting with a foundation in Section 1, the anatomy of networks, followed by Section 2, mapping the digital world. Then we'll pivot to the cybersecurity side with Section 3, the hacker hierarchy, Section 4, anatomy of a cyber attack, and finally wrap it all up with Section 5, fortifying your digital defenses.
All right, Section 1, the anatomy of networks. Let's lay that fortress foundation.
So, stripped of all the intimidating tech jargon, a computer network is literally just two or more interconnected computer systems that are sharing information. That's it. Whether they're physically wired together using Ethernet cables or they're connected wirelessly over Wi-Fi, the fundamental goal is always just sharing data and resources. It's basically the digital equivalent of building roads between different outposts so they can actually trade and communicate with each other.
But of course, those roads have to scale up depending on what you need. So, for example, you have your LAN, or local area network. Think of this like your home or a small office. It covers a pretty tight space, maybe 100 to 1,000 meters, and it allows for really high-speed, secure sharing. Then you step up to the MAN, the metropolitan area network. This connects entire university campuses or city blocks up to roughly 100 kilometers, and it usually uses lightning-fast fiber optics. And finally, you have the WAN, the wide area network. This thing is massive. It can span up to 100,000 kilometers, connecting branch offices all across the globe. In fact, as Weber points out, the ultimate WAN is literally the internet itself.
Moving right along to Section 2, mapping the digital world, giving the fortress an address. Now, this brings us to IP addresses and subnetting. The easiest way to think about this is like the Postal Service. An IP address, or Internet Protocol address, is a logical numeric direction assigned to every single device on the network. It is exactly like a street address for your computer. It tells the rest of the network exactly where you're located. But imagine if every single piece of mail in a country had to go through one central post office. Traffic would completely grind to a halt, right? Well, that's where subnetting comes in. Subnetting is essentially neighborhood zoning. It partitions a single massive network into smaller, localized subnetworks. This keeps the local data traffic safely inside its own neighborhood, which maximizes speed and cuts down on overall congestion. All right, Section 3, the hacker hierarchy. Who exactly is laying siege to our castle? So the absolutely crucial point here is that hacking itself is really just a tool. It's completely dependent on the intent of the person using it. On one side, you've got the black hat hackers. These are the classic villains of the cyber world. They have malicious intent, they operate illegally, and they're usually out for personal financial gain through theft, blackmail, or corporate espionage. But on the exact opposite side, using the exact same skill sets, are the white hat hackers. These folks have good intent. They actively seek permission from companies to attack their networks. Basically, they're highly paid legal bounty hunters, and their entire job is to find the holes in the fortress wall before the black hats do. But as we know, the real world isn't always perfectly black and white. Enter the gray hat hackers. These individuals will hack into systems without permission, which, yes, is illegal, but they don't actually have malicious intent. They might breach a massive company just to prove that they can do it, and then they'll turn around and offer to fix the vulnerability for a fee. The text actually highlights Kevin Mitnick as a famous example of someone who operated right in this blurry space. And then we also have red hat hackers. These are your hacktivists. They're groups who operate in a sort of morally ambiguous territory, and they use cyber attacks not for money, but as a form of protest to drive political or social change.
Okay, Section 4, Anatomy of a Cyber Attack. Let's look at the actual tactics of the siege.
So it begs a pretty massive question, doesn't it? With all these incredible technologies, fiber optics, subnets, complex routers, how exactly does a bad actor gain unauthorized access to a secure network in the first place? How do they actually bypass it all?
Well, it's actually surprisingly systematic. According to Weber, a typical attack generally follows 3 distinct phases. First up is network enumeration. This is the reconnaissance phase. The hacker is just quietly gathering sensitive data about the network, learning employee names, figuring out email structures, seeing what software is running. Second is vulnerability analysis. Armed with all that gathered data, they scan the perimeter looking for weak spots. Maybe it's an unpatched server or an old, abandoned email account. And finally, phase 3 is exploitation. They overpower that vulnerability, they breach the system, and then they actively try to blend in as a normal user so they can maintain their control.
And let's look at how this systematic approach builds into their specific weapons of choice. These are the siege tactics you have almost certainly encountered yourself. Traditional phishing involves spoofed emails or completely fake websites that are specifically designed to steal your passwords. But attackers have evolved, right? Now we've got smishing, which is fraud delivered via SMS and text messages straight to your phone, and Vishing, voice phishing. This is where attackers spoof legitimate caller IDs and use high-pressure psychological manipulation over a phone call to get you to just hand over your sensitive bank details. But hey, if those psychological tricks don't work, they'll just resort to raw computing power. This is called a brute force attack. Hackers will use massive databases containing literally trillions of password combinations. They run these automated smart scripts that systematically hammer a login portal, guessing thousands of passwords every single second. Honestly, if you have a weak password, a brute force script doesn't even need to trick you. It simply calculates your password in a matter of moments. All right, home stretch. Section 5, Fortifying your digital defenses. It's time to protect the castle walls. Defending a network means you need layered digital shields. First, access control. That means complex, long passwords and tiered permissions so, an intern doesn't have the exact same system access as the CEO. Next, firewalls. These are your barricades, literally blocking unauthorized or suspicious traffic from entering the local network. Behind those walls, you need anti-malware, acting as your internal guards, constantly searching out and destroying any hidden viruses. And especially for remote workers, business VPNs are absolutely essential. They create private, encrypted tunnels so your data can be accessed safely from anywhere in the world. But wait, we so often completely forget about the physical world. Digital fortresses have very real physical vulnerabilities, too. Weber's text is super clear on this. Servers generate a ton of heat, so they have to be in cold, well-ventilated areas. You gotta keep the environment free of dust, bugs, and yes, keep liquids far, far away. Because honestly, a spilled cup of coffee will burn a motherboard just as effectively as a virus will delete a hard drive. And don't forget the weather. A lightning strike can fry your entire network infrastructure in a millisecond if you aren't properly protected. Okay, I really want to pause right here, because this might actually be the most important takeaway of this entire explainer. Weber notes, and I quote, "The most common and frequent threat that all computer networks must face is human error." Think about that. You can have million-dollar firewalls, you can have military-grade encryption, and the most advanced anti-malware on the market. None of it, absolutely none of it matters if an employee just carelessly clicks a malicious link in a phishing email or leaves a server room door propped open. The human element is always, always the weakest link in the fortress wall. Which leaves us with this final thought. Take a look at your own digital life right now. Think about your home Wi-Fi, your office setup, your personal passwords. Is your network truly secure, or are you just one smart script away from a total breach? Understanding the architecture is the first step, sure, but continuous vigilance is really the only way to keep the digital siege at bay. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep building, and whatever you do, keep those fortresses secure.